Fake news is old news. Lies and propaganda have been around as long as human speech. We can look at Google's search history. What if I told you that the term fake news has really only shown up since the 2016 elections? But then we can see it show up across the world and it stays widely used until today. The term became famous in 2016. First, President Trump used it to belittle the media, and then people discovered those large-scale networks of made-up news using outrageous headlines to drive traffic to other websites. Some of them just to make a few bucks. But others of them were part of a large foreign influence campaign. That's what came out in 2017, and as you know, led to a lot of news coverage all across the world. Since then, I think we all agree that the problem has only grown bigger. And the last weeks have shown that we really haven't found a solution or even figured out where to start. My name is Bastian Purrer. I'm originally from Germany. I've spent some time in the States, both working as well as studying at Harvard Business School. I've spent most of my time working during my career in online marketing for tech companies. All these newsletters that you didn't expect, all these banners that creepily follow you from website to website, that was my job. So on the market for our data, our privacy, I was the one buying the data. In the last 2 years, I lived in Indonesia, in Southeast Asia. Indonesia is the world's third largest democracy. This, by the way, is my lovely fiancée when she exercised her right to vote. Going into those same elections she was voting on, I was consulting a political party during their marketing efforts. That's around 2.5 years ago. And when I did that, I realized something that really shocked me. Every single political party in Indonesia, and now I know around the world, is running millions of fake accounts. What are also called bot networks. Those fake accounts are social media profiles that look a lot like ordinary voters, but are actually run by computers, by engineers, by software, and supported by manual workers. So that by just clicking the right buttons, one person could handle thousands of accounts at a time. And they use those accounts to boost certain content on social media by liking posts, by adding comments, by retweeting stories. And those stories were oftentimes dubious, including fake news. Posts to mislead common, real voters. What this did is to push propaganda to the top of their feeds on Facebook and Twitter and other networks. And that's when I realized this is actually how fake news spreads. How did this all end? The Indonesian elections resulted in claims of fraud, 2 candidates, 2 declarations of victory, 2 sets of results, huge protests and riots, people dying in the streets of the capital. That probably sounds a little bit familiar to you. It does to me. Now that I'm living in the United States, the parallels between those 2 elections are really striking. And I think it shows that misinformation and the negative consequences are not a uniquely American problem. It's not the product of one single politician. It's a systematic problem. It's about how we share information, how we find information, how we figure out what is true and what is not. Today, fake news is used all across the world to spread fake news. It's used in democracies everywhere. But it's also used by autocratic regimes, by dictatorships. For example, the regimes in Saudi Arabia and in China have been caught red-handed running those huge propaganda machines, creating fictitious content at scale, content that supports their agenda, and very often posts that blame foreign influence and conspiracies for problems at home. Let's take a step back. Let's remember what the internet was supposed to be. Like 15, 20 years ago, we all believed that the internet could bring us all together, could democratize society, give a voice to everyone, enable us to understand each other better. The term Web 2.0 It means everyone can post on the web. It was supposed to lead to true participation. We actually had reasonable debates on Facebook in random forums. I missed that time. Do you remember this? This is 2006. Time Magazine's Person of the Year was you, all of us, because we, and I quote, control the information age. And we ask you, does it feel like you're in control right now? 10 years ago, in 2011, we had Facebook revolutions, the Arab Spring, people that overthrew the dictators all across the Middle East, and we praised social media for it, and they really deserve the credit. So what happened since then? What happened to the internet and social media? We see polarization staggering, political violence, hate crime is up. We just saw online communities inspire and plan an attempted coup against the US government. When these rioters were storming the Capitol, evidence shows that they truly believed that they were defending American democracy. They believed even that the military, the police would eventually support them. Fake news is killing people every single day, spreading genocide like it did in Myanmar, by spreading lies about the coronavirus, about masks. There's really little evidence that today in the information age, we're much better at distributing information about the viruses, about the disease, than we were in 1918 during the Spanish flu. Think about that. The first well-known example of systematic social media manipulation was, of course, Vladimir Putin and his campaign to influence the American elections in 2016. Silicon Valley would have called it a growth hack. But do you really understand what was happening? I mean, it's been 4 years, and we've seen countless hours of TV coverage. Do you really know what's happened? How is it that a campaign by the Russian government that only cost a few $1 million caused so much more damage than decades of propaganda and had so much more impact than, frankly, a $1 billion ad campaign by politicians? For the last few years, I worked on trying to figure out what exactly happened. And this is how it works. It comes down, social media propaganda comes down to two distinct elements. First, try to create or identify some very high quality profiles or pages, profiles that seem trustworthy to a specific audience. That can be like a fake local newspaper or a Facebook page that pretends to be an activist group. It can be a real public persona, like the Twitter account of a former president comes to mind, of course. It could be state propaganda that dresses up as an independent newspaper. There's an example as Russia Today. It's a media company controlled by the Kremlin that creates high-quality YouTube videos in 5 different languages. These profiles will share questionable content, oftentimes of pretty high production value, to gain your trust. The example on screen is a video that was viewed over 20 million times and is full of lies about the vaccines. And these accounts, these posts, probably many of you have already read about. This is what's being talked about in general. More recently, social media giants Twitter and Facebook have been more active in deleting those accounts and some of these posts. But they fail to go to the core of the problem, and that's where step 2 comes in. What's under the surface, what is boosting these high visibility pages are armies of fake accounts, bot networks. When I talk about bots in this context, I mean social media accounts that look and behave like human beings, but are controlled by software, by a small team controlling millions of accounts, and that pretend to represent millions of people. For now, you might be able to identify some of these bots by their bad grammar or by their empty profiles, but with AI, with artificial intelligence improving at really high speeds, and governments honestly putting billions into those disinformation networks, it will get harder and harder to differentiate the human from the bot. Let's look at some of those numbers. Facebook officially, according to their own numbers, deleted over 5 billion fake accounts in 2020. 5 billion. That's roughly double their official user number. But then on top of that, there's studies, and really anyone you ask who works in the field, that says a large part of the remaining users, of their current 2.7 billion users, are also fake accounts. One study by the Think Computer Foundation puts that number at 50%. So somebody obviously puts a lot of money into creating fake accounts there. Who would that be? A really brave whistleblower, a Facebook engineer, Sophie Shang, came out just a few months ago, and she talked about how campaigns all across the world run these manipulation campaigns and how Facebook just ignores them. It's really not hard for a good engineer to build a whole army of bots, accounts that like, comment, share, retweet posts. And what these accounts are doing has two effects. First, it pushes these posts to more real people. It pushes them to the top of our feeds. And second, we perceive this content differently. If a post has 10,000 likes, if somebody's followed by 1 million people, we're much more likely to believe them. It's called social proof. It's a bias we all have, and that's usually useful. Just how easy is it to get your hands on such accounts? Let me show you. This screen recording is from a few days ago. These Facebook accounts only cost 7 cents. You can buy accounts with different level of quality and profile completeness. And you can buy accounts for other social networks as well. Instagram, Twitter, Gmail, Reddit, even LinkedIn and TikTok. This page is one of many I found and allows super easy ordering via Shopify checkout. What does that mean for democracy? When everyone with money can just buy themselves fake grassroots popularity, it means our opinions and our voices can get crowded out. And it means that any sort of public support or opposition to an idea can be created out of thin air. It really goes against the core principle of democracy and what we stand for, that everyone is supposed to have one voice, no matter how rich you are. There's a study by Carnegie Mellon that shows that 50% of COVID-related tweets were posted by sophisticated bot accounts. Carnegie Mellon called those propaganda machines. How many people do you think have died because of these propaganda machines? And then there's this myth that many educated people believe that only the uneducated fall for fake news. We all fall for fake news. Studies show that those with higher education are just as likely to fall for fake news, especially if it confirms their worldview. So this is how we got to today, where 31% of Americans, 31%, many million of them with a college degree, believe that the last elections were stolen. The good news here is we found the weakness of fake news. There's actually a study published in the Nature Journal of Science that shows that we could almost eliminate the spread of fake news if we were only to eliminate fake accounts and bots. If only Facebook and Twitter will eliminate them. But those companies have a huge financial interest to keep them alive, at least to a certain extent, because they need to show growth in their quarterly user numbers to their shareholders, because they're selling those views and those clicks to advertisers, clients, and pay real dollars to advertise to real people. So if we summarize, I come to 3 conclusions. First, fake identities are the main driver of fake news and other toxic content because they undermine accountability to buy popularity. And those fake accounts have become a really common tool around the world to promote your point of view, to undermine democracy, to crowd out the voice of real people. Second, the big social networks, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, would see a significant drop in user numbers if they would delete all the fake accounts. They would massively lose users and they would massively lose revenues, which means they're pretty unlikely to do that if we don't force them. And lastly, thirdly, with artificial intelligence becoming smarter and smarter, for example, now being able to create human faces of humans that don't actually exist, it will be harder and harder to identify those fake accounts and fake news, which means we should really not think that a solution can be to ask people to just do your research or, hey, just be careful what you share. That implies that only uninformed people fall for fake news. It implies that somehow it's possible to determine everything that's true and everything that's false. We need to find more systematic solutions, more scalable solutions. So what are those? When I lived in Indonesia, when I saw these problems, I decided to launch humanID. humanID is a nonprofit. It's open source. It's run by volunteers from around the world. And what we have built is an online login, kind of like the login with Facebook. Just the humanID login is completely anonymous. It's completely private. It blocks abusive users and spammers and bullies and so on. The technology basically verifies users, but without saving any personal information. And with this amazing team behind me, it has been really an inspiration to work on this together. We've received support from donors from around the world, from Harvard Business School, and from the Mozilla Foundation. It has really shown me that people are aware of these problems and they want to solve them. But if you want to help, you don't need to create your own startup to get involved. Here's 3 things that I want to recommend you. First, as a voter, let's not allow governments to use fake news and online misbehavior as an excuse to undermine our privacy. Instead, let's strengthen privacy laws so people can feel safe and protected online. We need voters to demand more privacy protection, just like they did in Europe and California, where legislation was introduced more recently. Secondly, we also need to pressure the big tech companies. Just deleting a few users or posts, that might be good PR, but it's not a good sustainable strategy. Facebook, Google, Twitter cannot be trusted in moderating free speech. Mostly, it doesn't address the core of the problem. We need to pressure them to find and delete bot networks and to increase privacy and transparency. And lastly, use your agency as an individual to champion startups and organizations that offer real alternatives. Get engaged, share with friends, use privacy-focused platforms, apps, browsers, instead of the solutions by big tech. Support small projects that have a new approach to community online. I see hundreds of entrepreneurs and engineers every year that come up with new ideas, but they really need your help. If they want to have a chance against these big, powerful entities, we need to work together. We need innovation like this to have a chance to fix the internet. Let's not give up on the vision of a better internet. Let's give every human a voice, one voice. Let's not allow fake accounts to flood our voices out. Imagine the power of community if users feel safe and protected, but also feel accountable, because spreading lies or bully others has consequences. Imagine a true democratic debate online from the bottom up. Imagine how we could mobilize if fake accounts wouldn't undermine our communities. Imagine the internet like it was supposed to be, a tool to empower us, to connect us, to unite us. Thank you very much.